Hi everyone, welcome to the Movieception Show. My name is Fariba, and today I want to talk about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. It's the latest Ghostbuster movie that is now out in theaters. I've seen it for myself, and I want to talk about it. So, in terms of Ghostbusters, I will say that I'm a pretty casual, watcher, casual fan. I will say this, I have seen all the movies up till this point, so hallelujah, finally. I'm actually caught up with something for once. But I have seen the originals. I have seen the 2016 version that a lot of people hate. And I have seen the one, of course, the recent one with Afterlife. So with Frozen Empire, I didn't really have too much expectations going on because, again, I'm more of a casual viewer than really just like a major fan. But I did want to go see this movie just because, again, it is Ghostbusters. Who doesn't want to go see a Ghostbusters movie? Especially when you have like pretty massive casts like Paul Rudd, Carrie Coon, McKenna, Finn Wolfhard. Then you have the originals like Bill Murray, Ernie Hudson, and Dan Aykroyd. Like, I was so, hey, I'm very interested. I want to go see this film, as well as the fact that, this is a film that is really trying to kind of be its own different sort of Ghostbusters and move away from like the old stuff and try to kind of go into a new era, right? So that was totally fine by me. I will say that the trailers weren't the greatest. I think the first one was at least decent. The second one, not so much. So I will say that that did kind of concern me a little bit about the quality of this movie. Now that I have seen it, here's what I'll say. It's not the greatest Ghostbusters film. I will tell you that. I do think that Afterlife is a much better movie. I felt like Afterlife definitely had a much better message behind it. It had a much better theme because of the fact that it was so focused on, the legacy of Egon Spengler, played by Harold Ramis, who had passed long before that the actual movie had been out. I feel like Afterlife was one that really honed in on the legacy of Ghostbusters and the love of it. It was a true love letter to the original movie that I personally was just like, wow, I really enjoyed Afterlife. I think Afterlife, like, I would say that that's like maybe the second best Ghostbusters movie aside from the first one. In terms of Frozen Empire, even though this is a movie that's also honing on, being a tribute to the originals, as well as the fact that this is supposed to be a tribute to Ivan Reitman, I was not really as satisfied with this one as I was with Afterlife. This one, it's like, one of the biggest problems with this film is that there's just so much going on. You can tell instantly that they're really honing in on the nostalgia of like the whole franchise. So, we got Slimer, we got, the original characters coming back and showing up and being involved. We got the actual firehouse back, the actual, location, the place that, everything started, the Ghostbusters. Then we have the Ecto-1, right? So this is a film that is really, really deep into the nostalgia, the fan service, the Easter eggs. But with all of that happening, it came in the expense of the actual, like, consistency of the storytelling and trying to be a bit more balanced on it, especially with some of the characters and the storytelling and the villain. And I mean, this is not to say that, this is for me to say that Frozen Empire is a bad movie. It's not a bad movie, like, not in a way that, Rotten Tomatoes showing like the 43%. I don't think it's so terrible that's like one of the worst movies. It's not. I feel like I will say this, that it is actually entertaining enough that I was watching it. I was very intrigued about some things. There were areas here and there I was like, okay, these are some fun bits. I like that we are kind of playing a little bit on, the old versus the new kind of coming together, going back to New York, bringing all this nostalgia, trying to bring a little bit of this mythos behind this character and some of the new characters that we do see, like Kumail Nanjiani, which is totally fine by me. What ended up becoming the problem is that it really wasn't as in-depth. It wasn't as layered. You can tell some areas were a bit too fast in its pacing. They're trying to put so many things together and it's just like it becomes so overstuffed. There are so many subplots going on. They're just kind of like wondering, okay, well, what's the main focus? It's a lot of stuff going on in this movie that it became at expense of the actual pacing, the consistency of the actual storytelling, as I said before. And again, this is a film that, I really do appreciate the fact that they are trying to, pass the torch onto the new guys, which is totally fine by me. We do get the sense of that very early on in this movie, and I love that. It does seem to show that Phoebe Spangler, played by McKenna, is going to be a really big factor into this whole, this new phase of this franchise, which is totally totally fine by me. I just wish that it could take a little bit more time to dedicate those storylines rather than just having to add so many things coming into the story to, you know, just for the fact that they just want to add all this nostalgia to it. Like for instance, right? I'll say for one thing, like for Bill Murray, for instance, right? He is in this movie, he is in this film, but he barely has like any role in this film whatsoever. Like he pops up maybe 2-3 times in this movie and that's about it. But he doesn't really, like, you could literally, like, you know, take him out of the movie and it would still be the same movie. That's like, there's just, again, this is where I'm saying there's just really overstuffed. They're really honing in on the nostalgia of it, that it's just, instead of really focusing on the actual storytelling, the mythos, and focus on the Ghostbusters and seeing how this team is evolving, that there's just a lot of things going on that kind of interrupts that story. So that was really my big issue with this film, is that it could have just been a lot more focused. And here's the thing, it takes a lot of time trying to establish the mythos too, which is totally fine. A lot of things just didn't really make sense here and there, which I feel like, again, this could have been, you know, amended if they'd just taken a bit more time to focus on some of the more details of like what's going on within the film, the mythos, the idea of the villain and how he's involved and how everyone else is involved. Like that could have been a little bit more polished if they'd taken a bit more time on those rather than just having to add so much of the fan service in this movie. But by the time we do get to the end, like, you can tell how, you know, how they took so much time trying to establish some of the things from the beginning and try to add so many things in terms of the subplots and some of the characters and this character development and storytelling, that by the time you get to the end of the film, everything does feel super rushed by the time we actually get to see this film, because the villain takes a while to really, you know, show up. We see him, we acknowledge him, but we don't actually get to get a glimpse of him until much more into the end of this movie. And by then it's like everything's kind of being wrapped up, so there isn't, again, it's just a pretty generic ending that you would get. But yeah, I just felt like there was just a lot of inconsistency with this film. I just felt that it didn't have as much of the heart and the soul that I felt with Afterlife. Like with Afterlife, what I really appreciate about it is that it is a movie that really focused on this, you know, this dysfunctionality of this family, the Spangler family, how, you know, they're having to carry on this legacy from, you know, Egon Spangler, how he's involved, how it has affected his family, his daughter, his daughter's grandchildren, and then bringing that connection together, and how Egon was so obsessed with trying to be focused on this and how that has impact on his family, and then bringing that all together. I felt like Afterlife did a really good job making that really consistent and making it so that the Spangler family is, you know, we get to learn about them. Yeah, they have some flaws to them, but they're really, at least in a sense, you're very intrigued by these characters. And that's what I really liked about Afterlife, is that it was really focus. It was far more consistent in how it was approaching its characters, its storytelling, and, you know, incorporating some of the more, you know, Ghostbusters, you know, nostalgia, while adding in some of the more fresh faces, fresh story. And again, that one was definitely a bit more on the nostalgia side, because they do bring in Zool again. Whereas this one, we do get a new character. But this is what I liked about Afterlife. Afterlife had a really good balance of the old and the new, making it nostalgic, but also really introducing this new era. I feel like that was a really perfect way of balancing everything together. Whereas this one was definitely a bit more overstuffed. There's just a lot too much going on. Some of the characters, like, you can tell they were just kind of there. They didn't really have too much of a purpose. That is not to say that, you know, the performances were anything bad or anything like that. I mean, Paul Rudd had some pretty funny moments here and there in this film. But I just wish it could have been a bit more, it could have just been a little bit more consistent, especially when they were introducing things like, you know, this whole research facility that's really focused on the paranormal. Like, I wish they could have taken a little bit more time to dedicate that, try to be a bit more, try to incorporate more of those aspects, give us a better idea of what Winston does in this movie, played by Ernie Hudson. Like, what does he really do? Why is he so rich? Why is he so involved? How does he have the money to do this? These are the things I wish could have been a bit more thought out, as well as some of the other things like, you know, Kamal Nanjiani's character. But yeah, I mean, again, this is not to say that it's a terrible film. It's not a terrible film. I was entertained. I was able to watch this film. This is a pretty good popcorn flick, and it had some really good nostalgic value to it that's like, okay, this is totally fine. I just wish it could have been a lot more thought out in terms of execution, like maybe take out a lot of just remove some of the subplots that were clearly not going to be resolved, focus in on the new characters, and then bring in the original characters here and there. Like Ray Stantz was a really important character. He was basically very connected with Phoebe, so that was totally fine. But yeah, it's not the perfect film. It has some really good sequences here and there. There are some things I did like, some things I did not like. Too much going on, I think, is the big thing. There's just so much going on in this movie that, again, it could have been less is better, right? It's the whole idea of just less is better. And I think that there was just too much going on that it definitely kind of took away a lot of the heart and soul that was missing in this movie that I really loved from Afterlife. But this is not a terrible film to say. I think that if anything, and it's not a terrible movie either. Like, again, I feel like if you were to ask me to rank this, I'll probably say definitely not better than Afterlife, definitely not better than the first original Ghostbusters, but definitely at least better than 2016 version. I think it's definitely gonna be a toss up between like where I would rank Ghostbusters 2 and this movie. But yeah, it's not a terrible film. I for the most part, I did enjoy it. I just wish that it could have been a little bit more thought out, where it's like, instead of just being just a generic popcorn movie, that I would have liked a little bit more of the substance, a little bit more of the heart and soul that I really appreciated from Afterlife. And I think that was missing from this movie. But that's just all I have to say about Frozen Empire right there. That's what I think about Frozen Empire. But yeah, that's all I have to say about the movie. I think the action's fine. The story's fine. Again, just a lot too much of the fan service and too much of the overstuffed narratives that, again, could have been better executed. But again, that's what I think. That's what I think about Frozen Empire right there. Again, it's not a terrible film. If you were to ask me for a rating, I'll probably give it like a 3. A solid 3. But yeah, that's all to say about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I know a lot of people are like really juggling on whether or not it is actually a good film. Critics don't really like it, but the audiences really seem to love this film. I'm kind of in the middle, where it's like, I'm kind of in the middle, but leaning towards like slightly positive, where it's like, okay, it's a fine film. It's not my favorite, but I wish things could have been better. But let me know what your thoughts are having now seen this movie. If you have seen it, what are your thoughts having now seen Frozen Empire? Did you like it? Did you not like it? How do you think this compares to the other Ghostbusters entries? Where would you really rank it out of the 5 films? What are some things that you think could have worked better? Or do you think that you actually enjoyed? What do you think about the nostalgia and the fan service in this movie? Like, is that what you wanted? Or do you think that there could have been a little bit more consistency and maybe could have taken a little bit stuff out? If you agree with me on that, let me know your thoughts below and make sure to like and subscribe.